to Teaching Tip Tuesday. My name is Michelle, aka the Ignited Teacher, and what I do on Teaching Tip Tuesday is I help math teachers just like yourself who teach struggling learners to effectively manage their classrooms and increase their students' achievement. And the way that I do that is through project-based learning, math, pedagogy, instructional strategies, effective instructional strategies, and classroom management and response to intervention and technology integration. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight for Teaching Tip Tuesday. I'm here every Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you cannot catch me live, no worries. I stream to multiple platforms, but the one that you want to subscribe to is YouTube, and that's where I house all of my Teaching Tip Tuesday videos, and they live there. So if you missed the Teaching Tip Tuesday, you can hop on over to YouTube and search for the Ignited Teacher, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that bell notification so that you can get an alert for when I go live or when I upload other videos. So if you're new here, thank you for tuning in tonight. If you tune in every Tuesday or catch me on the replay, thank you for being a part of my community. So with that being said, what we're going to do is go ahead and get started because this topic is a very popular topic among math educators. And you're probably saying, well, what is that topic? That topic is teaching students who are reading below grade level. Now, obviously, math teachers are not reading teachers. Well, some of us are. A lot of people don't know that I used to teach reading before I started teaching math. I taught reading, well, first and second grade, and then I taught fifth grade reading for 3 years. And then after that, and it's been 17 years, I've been teaching math only. And I taught math and science at one time, but solely math, definitely for the last 10 years. So with that, I can see math from a different lens. And when we're talking about teaching mathematics to students who do not read below grade level, the problem is twofold. And what that means is that the kids are struggling with actual reading, which is the fluency, and they're also struggling with the concepts such as predicting, drawing conclusions, summarizing. All of those thinking skills are necessary for teaching mathematics. So a lot of teachers are saying, well, I'm not the reading teacher. Well, here's the thing in Title I schools. Reading is everybody's responsibility. And we're not saying reading, and some people say, well, literacy. Reading is everybody's responsibility in a Title I school because the students are struggling readers. 90% of the students at the high school that I teach in, the kids are more than likely reading below grade level. It's only a small percentage that are reading on grade level. And that's the reality of it. And as math teachers, you have to have some content literacy strategies in your toolbox to make your job a lot easier. So if you're at a Title I school and you know that your students are reading below grade level, what I first recommend is that you talk to your reading teacher. One of the things, especially at the secondary level, the math teachers do not talk to the English teachers. And that causes a problem because the English teacher can help your students think through some of those problems, which you're going to see tonight after I go through the whole idea of bringing in content literacy in mathematics. Not so much focusing on, oh, I'm going to help the child read the words. No, but thinking through the problem. And you're going to hear me say reading is thinking. And if you look at it from that standpoint, you won't say, well, I'm not a reading teacher. If you're teaching the children and reinforcing those skills that they use in a reading class, then you're supporting the literacy part, which helps your students learn the math, whether the student can read or not. A lot of the students that we teach that are struggling readers have oral admin, or they have tests read aloud. A lot of those kids have those accommodations. So if you're teaching them how to think through the process, then you're supporting that literacy and the reading, and you're supporting your English department, you're supporting your reading teacher, and in elementary, you're supporting your English language arts teacher. So you're probably saying, well, as a math teacher, what are those skills that the reading teacher is teaching the students in the class that I can use to help my math students understand these complex concepts? So the first one is predicting. When my students struggle with math, one of the things that I notice, they do not predict well. So say for instance, and it goes with problem solving, and you may be asking your student, well, what comes next? Well, if the student cannot infer, you see that word, and they teach this in reading, if they can't infer or say, okay, an inference is the text plus what you know, or making a text connection. In math, that's making a math connection of what they've been taught in your classroom. If they cannot connect those, then that's an issue. They can't, they're not going to be able to predict what they should do next because there's a disconnect. And that's what they teach in reading, but it's in a text concept. So look at the questions, and I like these little pictures. I forgot where I got them from, but when I saw them, I was like, oh, I can use these in my math class. Now, what do you think will happen next? In math, what do you do next? We're talking about procedures and steps. What clues? Same concept, different context, meaning in the math class, we may say not even keywords. Let me take that back. What words give you clues to what operation you're going to use? It's the same thinking process, but you adapt it to your math. It's the same thinking process. Then we're on to questioning. Oh, okay. If more teachers took responsibility for literacy, we will be better off. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I question, I search and ask, I investigate, I challenge, examine. That goes back to those accountable talks in your classrooms. And you say, and you're having these conversations in your class. When you challenge another person's thinking, and I know a lot of teachers are saying, well, you know, especially at the elementary level, they're questioning, well, why do we have to teach these kids these different strategies? Well, what it does, it helps the students to choose a tool appropriately, which goes back to the mathematical processes and the Common Core standards, which they call them the mathematical practices. But it teaches the kids to examine the strategy. Is it an effective strategy? And it brings it to where the kids have rich conversations about what strategy will be actually an effective strategy, because they have strategies in math that will work, but strategies are not always the most effective way. For example, when I teach my students to convert fractions greater than one, because I don't want to offend anyone and say improper fractions, which that's what we've been calling them all these years, but now they're fractions greater than one. And they want to constantly use the fraction circle. Well, that's ineffective. Yes, it's a picture, but we have to move the kids to progress to that algorithm because it's a more efficient way. So some math, especially elementary teachers, have demonized the algorithm. It's not it's nothing wrong with the algorithm. If the students can understand why the algorithm works, then you've done your job. Let the children go into the algorithm. It's more efficient. And the more time they have with the algorithm, the better math student they will be in secondary, because they will have the fluency that they need for equations and expressions in algebra 1. So it's not that it's about questioning these strategies. And that's why we have the multiple strategies with Common Core. So the next thing that we do in math and in reading is clarify. Look at the words. When I clarify, I explain, I reread. So when your students say when my students solve problems and what the operation that they use does not match what the text is saying, we tell our students to go back and reread. And which is another word for clarifying, which is the same thing in reading. We solve, simplify, remember, define, sharpen. Those are all the things that we do in math. So if you have to clarify, you can teach your students I need help understanding this part of the problem. But if those are the same things that are thinking processes that are used in reading. But if we would teach that literacy portion in math, it would take a lot of whether the kids cannot read the problem, but if they can think through the problem and the problem is read to them, they can get it. And this is a true story. I had a student that was a special ed student in 5th grade. She struggled with reading, and her memory, she had a really good memory. So I had her for science and math. She passed the math test, but they wasn't sure about the science STAR test because her reading was so low. But do you know that child passed that test because it was read to her, but she had the thinking skills. Now, she may not have been able to connect with those words, but she had it. And she did the math, but she just struggled with the reading. And the last one is summarize. After kids read problems or are ready to solve it, they should come to a conclusion or decide, okay, based on the text or based on the problem, I'm going to do this because certain words in there indicate this. And if you can teach those kids to summarize and come up with what they're supposed to do, you can teach children that struggle with reading to problem solve. But you have to make sure that they understand the content literacy part of it. And you can get that by connecting with those reading thinking skills. So, in my class, I always use read, draw, write. Now, this came with Common Core. I know some states say they didn't like Common Core. Well, read, draw, write was the best thing that I had ever come across. Because all those things that I just went through that's what I used to tell my students. we do the read part, but what does read mean? Reading is thinking. So my students knew or know when we're reading, we're thinking. It's not about connecting with words, it's about those processes needed to go through this problem. Yeah, it is. It's on my Facebook page. So, next, we draw. So, the draw part goes back to what you have read and thought through, gone through those, and then you decide on what you're supposed to do based on your thinking. And that's the disconnect that I see with problem solving strategies. Now, did anyone tell me to do this? No, because I taught reading when I started teaching math only. It made sense that my students was missing those skills carried over from the reading class, because a lot of kids that struggle, they see different subjects as separate. Then after that, because when I was in Louisiana, when I started doing this, because they're a Common Core state, they had to do constructive responses. So they had to have a right part. And your right part was a combination of the draw and the thinking. I did this because goes back straight back to the read part. I know, and so that is read, draw, write in a nutshell, but it goes deeper. So I'm gonna tell you one thing and make you laugh. So I had a class. Oh my God! When I say problem solving was their issue, what I would do for homework, and it used to anger my principal, I would send one problem for them to solve, but they had to use read, draw, write. And I did that for, I want to say 2 months. But guess what? My students became better problem solvers because they didn't have a whole bunch. You had one problem to focus on. And they solved that problem. They brought it back because I needed them to master thinking through these steps. And that class, I tell you, when I got my scores back for STAR, my problem solving part, where we had the processes, I forgot what they call them on STAR. Oh, they call them process skills. So that problem solving and being able to analyze in those higher parts, my students scored high in that. But it's about helping the kids to solve, even if they can't read. You read it to them, or in that you dialogue through it. They're not gonna I'm be honest with you, testing is difficult at Title I schools because you have so many groups, because so many of them oral admin. But if you teach your kids to think through these processes and teach them that reading is thinking, once it's read to them, they can think through that test. I'm telling you, because I'm a living witness, that it works. Then I found thinking routines. This is my secret weapon. I even teach it now. We're virtually, my kids, we have started with See, Think, Wonder. It is the hardest thing to do. Thinking routines are difficult. If you can teach your kids one thinking routine, and that's what I had to learn, you're moving mountains. Because See, Think, Wonder, I have to teach my kids to look at, what do you notice? What have you been taught in class about what you notice? Think about it and connect it. So in the thinking routine, that was one of them. The second year I did it, because I only do one thinking routine a year, a new one anyway. So sentence, phrase, word, I adapted it. It's really more for context, but I adapted it to identify a sentence that will help you understand how to solve the problem. And I put a box there. This is the actual chart that I created for small group. And then box in a word from the problem that captured your attention. So I just gave them a couple of boxes, and I said it can be more than one, because a lot of students, and I found out a lot of my students, they got hung up on words. So it didn't have to just be one word, it'd be a couple of words to tell you how to solve that problem. So, sentence, phrase, word, you start with the sentence. And most problem solving, word problems don't have a lot of sentences. So, take the sentence, break it smaller into a phrase, and then find the words that help you solve the problem. This was gold. And I did this with a class who didn't know we had a problem solving strategy until the end of December, because their reading levels were so low. We couldn't start with the problem solving strategy. And a lot of the students, sometimes you might not be able to say, hey, we're going to start with a problem solving strategy. But you work on that content literacy, the summarizing, the predicting, all those things to help them think through it. So when you finally introduce your problem solving strategy, it's there. But thinking routines, if you can get that book, they work, because it teaches you and the students, because I learned a lot from this, and it helped me really analyze what my students needed from me and what they needed help with with the problem solving. So now I know it's difficult and all of these things, and you probably said, well, that's, you know, easier said than done. And I'm not going to say it's easy. And I'll be the first one to tell you it's not easy.